First off, I want to say welcome. Thank you for joining us for the 50th version of the Dare to Disrupt podcast. I want to thank you for coming out today and celebrating this, I'm going to say momentous occasion, Ryan, because I think it's a momentous occasion. This podcast is hosted by Ryan Newman. I'm going to introduce you to Ryan here in a second. But the idea for doing this podcast live here in the business school building actually originated the very first time Ryan and I actually met in my office upstairs. And that was, 16, 17 months ago. So it's great to actually see it come to fruition. This is actually the 6th time that this podcast has been done live. And to join us today for this podcast, it's also my honor to say that Asia Grant, who is a Smeal alum and a Schreyer College alum as well, is going to be the guest that Ryan will interview. She is the main attraction. I am the secondary attraction because Ryan and I are going to sit down here for a few minutes and have a brief conversation as well. So let me introduce you to Ryan. I want to make sure that I get everything right. Ryan is a managing director at Goldman Sachs, where he co-founded and co-leads the private wealth management team overseeing $13 billion in assets with a range of clients, including, there's a reason for this podcast focusing on entrepreneurs, because a lot of Ryan's clients are entrepreneurs, executives, and as well as institutions. He's a proud Smeal alum. He's also a proud alum of the Schreyer Honors College. He is the newest member of the Board of Visitors for the Smeal College of Business. And for those who don't know, Dare to Disrupt, this podcast is actually a product of Invent Penn State. And it's a podcast about Penn State alumni who, as I just mentioned, are innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders, and the stories behind their success. I just confirmed with Ryan that this podcast has now reached, correct me if I'm wrong, 69,435. Did I get it right? Soon to be 36 listeners. And again, this event here today marks the 50th version of this podcast. Ryan, it's great to have you here. Why don't you come up, join me, and we'll dive into the conversation.
This is great. I feel like I'm on the Saturday, Jay Leno or something. David Letterman.
Okay. Well, now you've set the bar too high for the interview. So.
Well, Corey, let's just be clear. You and I, no matter how well we do, it will pale in comparison to, as you said, the main event. If for no other reason, then I'm pretty sure Asia had glam here before setting things up. So we just can't compete with that.
So, Asia, I'm just warming the seat for you. So I'll do my best here. So, speaking of the 50th episode, right? Big milestone. It's the 50th episode. What's going through your mind?
It's so interesting. I feel like so much of my own experience has been having this big, broad vision and then having this experience sort of work up to the vision. For this, I have to say, it was kind of the opposite. There was no vision for this. It was just the experience of being able to interact and amplify Penn Staters, and not in my wildest dreams that I think we would get to the point of where we are in terms of having reach.
Well, that's great. And if you look back on those 49 previous episodes, what are the things that you remember most? What are the themes that sort of stick out at you that you've learned from these great disruptors, innovators, entrepreneurs?
I think the biggest theme that I've learned is that entrepreneurship is not one size fits all. It's very much everyone comes in different shapes and sizes, both figuratively and literally, and their mindsets come in different sizes. We have early bloomers, late bloomers, people that knew they wanted to be an entrepreneur from the time they were little, and those that were kind of backed in or forced into it. And so as I think about the archetype, if you will, it's not a one-size-fits-all, which I think is great news for our listeners and for the audience in general, because in theory, they make you think that anybody can do this.
That's great. So there is no one best way to become a disruptor entrepreneur. So is there something in those 49 episodes and the different individuals you've talked to that sort of stands out at you as something remarkable or maybe surprised you about their journey, since it's been so varied?
I have to just admit a little bit of a limitation of my own beliefs in this moment. I have 2 star instructors sitting in the front row here today. Greg Pierce, who is my honors professor and professor of finance, and Robin Stevens, the instructor and director of Wall Street Initiatives. And they can both attest, I was all about the grades when I was in school. I mean, if you put an A- in my path, get out of the way, right? And I think what I realized doing the interviews with so many of these individuals is that grades alone, unfortunately for me, are not enough. And more importantly, there's so many of these entrepreneurs that actually not only didn't excel in school, but they might have even struggled. Yet they've gone on to have remarkable success as business leaders and entrepreneurs. And I think that's been a little bit of a stereotype that I had to just kind of get over. Because back in class, I would have definitely said, oh, it's going to be the A students that are going to be running the show before long here.
All right, so I do have to interject and say, students, if you're listening, he's not saying that doing well in school won't help you succeed later in life. So I just want to get that straight. So have any of the conversations that you've had maybe changed the way you think about, you sort of touched on this, about success, maybe about leadership?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest realization I had is that you can have the best idea and you can have the best team and you can have the best training, but your timing might be off. And if your timing's off, it kind of just puts a little bit of a sour taste into the whole thing. And so we've had a lot of entrepreneurs where they did all the right things, but because of that timing not being right, the results weren't what they first thought. Conversely, we have entrepreneurs that would be the first to tell you they didn't really have the team, they didn't really have the skills, but boy, did they hit the moment right. And now they've had this extraordinary success. So I think it's this idea that there is no way to like reverse engineer or back solve this. It's as much about preparation as it is about things outside of your control, such as timing. And that's been a real eye-opener for me.
So as you think back on these previous interviews, there's a lot, and I'm sure they blur together over time, but is there one maybe phrase, one quote that sort of sticks in your head and says, this is one of the most memorable things that I heard during the 49 previous versions of this show?
I'm gonna break the question into two parts, because I caught out of the corner of my eye not one but two at least former guests with whom I've interviewed walk in here today. And the first one is Gary Brandeis, who is the, as we know, put together the real estate team to acquire the 9 Inn. And every time I go there in the last couple of years, I say, thank goodness for Gary, because it's an amazing building. And I remember Gary telling a story about how he was literally in the attic pulling wire as they were trying to get this building back up and running. And so this idea that service starts at the top. If there's a problem, it's not just a problem for the frontline person to answer, it's for everyone. And then another guest that's here today who's become a great friend is Ryan Owen. And Ryan was amazingly one of those people that survived 9/11, was actually in the North Tower. And Ryan tells this riveting story about basically having his sneakers on. And because he had his sneakers on, he literally sprinted to the Brooklyn Bridge at the age in his mid-20s. And, you know, to this day, Ryan is always wearing sneakers. In fact, even today, Ryan is wearing sneakers.
There they are, right there.
So it's stories like that that just sort of catch you, stop you dead in your tracks, and make you realize these are just pretty extraordinary individuals.
So one of the things that when we first started talking about this podcast and the potential of doing it here, I was really curious about the previous episodes, and I listened to many of them, but I took it one step further, being the geek that I am. I actually asked him for the transcripts of every single podcast. And the reason I did that is because we live in an age of AI. I actually ingested them into Claude and had Claude do a qualitative analysis of all 49 interviews. And I asked it to come up with the key themes, the things that were mentioned consistently across these 49 interviews. I'm not gonna read all of them, but one thing sort of jumped out as a key theme, and that is, we can call it different things: grit, stick-to-itiveness, willingness to overcome risks. It's all sort of getting at the same thing here, but you lived those 49 interviews. How would you sort of capture that in your own words, sort of thinking back on it?
You know, it's really interesting. I have this coach of mine who is, and I want to be very clear, he's a professional coach, but he is a very athletic. And so he's a triathlete. But no, he's not training me for a triathlon. And he talks about this experience about running in the out west by the Grand Canyon. And he was really trying to keep pace with this person who was much older than him and just seemed to be just taking off. And so he finally caught up to him, and he just said to him in a moment, and of course I'm thinking to myself, how are you even speaking? You're out of breath. He says, what, how do you do this? How do you just keep going? And he said, my vision for the future sustains my present agony. And this notion of what the degree to which people are able to live with discomfort, right? We talk about stepping out of your comfort zone. These people, as we'll see when we interview Asia, they live outside their comfort zone. And when you live in this space where you're outside your comfort zone, your nervous system literally has to adapt to a different style of behavior, where basically you wake up every day and you have this realization that this is just the state of play. And so that realization that every time I interview someone, we realize there are these moments where their whole life changed and they decided to live essentially in that place of discomfort and somehow managed to be semi-functioning adults doing that. And I think it's the realization that that's what they had to do to get to where they are that's really the most extraordinary aspect of this whole thing.
Well, another key theme is you've interviewed people that have actually said they're going to do something. In other words, they've attempted to disrupt. My guess is that in other walks of life outside this podcast, you've probably met a lot of people that have talked a lot about doing something, doing a startup, pursuing some sort of innovation, but never did it. So now that you've got this experience of looking back on these 49 people, soon to be 50, when you have Asia up here, that have actually said, I'm going to go try to realize my vision of whatever that is, and all the people that have tried, what separates the people that actually, to quote Nike, do it versus not do it?
I don't know if I have the answer to what separates, but I'll tell you one thing. In every single podcast interview we've done, we've always honed in on what was it for that moment, that person in that moment that caused them to go out and take that entrepreneurial leap. Because to your point, there's so many people that have a great idea or think about doing something, but never actually enact it. So now we've got 49 people, soon to be 50, that actually have taken that step. What did they do different? And I think the answer, I'll give you a two-part answer. Part one is to say, for a lot of these people, they had a real hardship that they faced early in their life that they had to overcome. And it's almost like a return to the problem, but this time they now have all the skills and capabilities and resourcefulness to be victorious. So I'd say that's part one. But then for every one of those people, you'll meet people like those in the room today who had great childhoods and everything was perfect and there was nothing really to complain or speak of or want for. And for those folks, it has to be something else. And usually it's this desire to see themselves in full, right? To live in their most fully actuated, fully effervescent self, whatever that means for them. And so whether it's achieving full bloom or revisiting a failure later in life to then sort of overcome something that maybe they weren't equipped to overcome in childhood, whether it's one or the other, I think both lead to the same kind of outcome, which is this realization of what their full potential is.
Well, one of the reasons that I think a lot of people don't pursue, especially if it's a startup, entrepreneurship, innovation, is it's scary. It's risky. It's uncertain. So in your experience, all entrepreneurs, all disruptors are going to face a high degree of uncertainty. What have you learned from these 49 individuals that tells you how they go about trying to navigate that uncertainty successful? And in particular, what's often associated with uncertainty is failure, right? You going into this, you're not going to know if you're going to be successful or not. So you've got to tolerate the huge risk of failure and then probably some degree of failure. So what have you learned from these folks in terms of how they navigate that?
I think it goes back to overcoming challenges when they were young. One of our podcast guests I'm thinking of in this moment is Vivian Valenti. So Vivian Valenti is the creator of Dazzle Dry, and a lot of folks have used Dazzle Dry. It's a quick dry nail polish. And Vivian talks about being 5 years old, living in the Philippines, no running water, no electricity, having heat and light at night come from something that looks like a soup can that her family would cut a hole in, put a wick in the top, and light. And she learned how to read and write her name from that candlelight. And this was a person that when she got into her field of chemistry, where she has advanced degrees, she was given a problem that people literally could not solve. They said, listen, this problem hasn't been solved in 3 years. And literally in a matter of months, she solved it. And she said, give me your next problem. And then they gave her another problem. And that one took her years to solve. So this insatiable desire to achieve, for some folks, you point that line back to that moment where literally it's Vivian back in front of that little soup can trying to learn how to figure things out. This is a person to which failure doesn't really have a definition, because for her, in that moment when she was that young child, failure was the difference between using whatever light she had to learn how to read or just rolling over and going to sleep. And so you take that person and now put them in an enterprise, a big business like Dazzle Dry, which she just returned to Penn State a couple weeks ago to launch 3 Penn State premium colors. So now we can all get Dazzle Dry. So check that out. And so that's really just an extraordinary story. And this person, by the way, she's just had all of this tremendous success, yet her humility is in many ways what defines her alongside of that success. And so I think there's something to be said about staying humble, not sort of arriving and being differently in the way in which you arrive from how you first started. But I think back to this idea that Penn State is a land-grant institution, and as a result, we have more first-gen college students and people that came from poverty than you'll find at a typical university. And I think those hardships really can be the building blocks for folks to really get ahead and achieve.
Yeah, that's great. I suspect, we haven't talked about this, I know, but I suspect that given the wealth and the richness of the stories, there might be a book in here somewhere in your future. So I'm just going to plant that seed.
Speaking of books,
yes,
let's turn the tables on you.
All right.
Mr. Dr. Dean Phelps. So you have a great book, which I love. Now the moniker, the short version is Hacked It, right? Cracked it. But there's really a longer version of Cracked It, which is how to solve big problems and sell solutions like a top strategy consultant. So talk to me about this idea of complex problems. And what are some of the key principles in how you think about complex problems and how you approach solving those?
So I'll back up a quick second here. My 2 co-authors and I wrote this book largely for students. So it was student driven. At the time I was a professor at HEC Paris, and we had MBA students coming to us saying, you, faculty members, need to do a better job of helping us get jobs with McKinsey, Bain, BCG, and other strategy consulting firms. So we said, well, what do consultants do in the strategy consulting space? They're hired guns to solve problems. All right, so we'll develop the toolkit of solving complex organizational problems because that's what consultants do. And to your question, it's a process, right? It's in the book, we talk about sort of a step-by-step process to solve complex organizational problems. And it really begins by identifying and then stating the problem. And this is probably the thing that people don't give enough weight towards or importance to, because let's face it, defining a problem isn't the sexy fun part. The sexy fun part is let's get a bunch of people in the room and brainstorm. Let's come up with solutions, right? And what tends to happen is if you get a group of people, and that's the way most organizations solve complicated problems, is it's not one individual. It's a group of people. It's a team, usually people from diverse skill sets, diverse part of the organization. They skip over this step, and what happens is only later and deeper in the process do they realize we're not really talking about the same thing, are we? We've got different ideas of what success looks like. We got different ideas of what the constraints on this problem are. We have different ideas of who the key stakeholders are. So we got to sort of go back and start all over again. So the first step that we talk about in the book is state the problem. So we have a template, right? So it's a practitioner book. It's a how-to book. Some people would call it an airport book. We have a tool, right? And the tool's called Tosca. And the reason it's called Tosca is for 2 reasons. Number one of my co-authors is a huge opera fan. So there's a Giacomo Puccini opera called Tosca, but we use Tosca as an acronym, right? Because acronyms are useful to remember. Tosca stands for what's the trouble? What tells you have a problem? What's going wrong? There's usually some piece of evidence. The way I usually think about it, you're sitting in a meeting, you're looking at a graph, and the graph is pointing down. And we usually think of graphs being good, they point up, right? So an upward trajectory of revenue or income, any type of performance, you see it going down. Well, that's trouble, right? We hope it's here, but it's here, right? So what tells you there's trouble, right? So that's the T. I'm going to skip over the O part for a second here and talk about S part, because I think that's the most important. S is success. What does success look like? What is going to tell you when you've effectively solved this problem? You have to agree in advance before you go in and start talking about solutions, because you're going to evaluate the solutions by what you think is going to be the impact on success. If you haven't defined success, you're never going to come to a convergence or agreement about what the solution is. So you got to define success. The O is owner. Who owns the problem? And sometimes in organizations, that's not an easy thing to figure out, right? Who ultimately is going to be responsible for and held accountable for whatever solution is put in place? The C is constraint. What are the binding constraints? Sometimes it's money, right? Sometimes it's regulations, laws. Sometimes it's cultural values. There are certain things in organizations that an organization just won't do because of their value system. You have to know what's going to constrain your search for solutions. And then finally, actors. Who are the critical stakeholders? So it's a good way just to remember, and I do this almost on a daily basis, because let's face it, when you work in an organization as a leader, what gets escalated to you? Problems. So I use this framework constantly, and I'm always talking, what's the trouble? Who's the owner? What does success look like? What are the constraints? Who are the key stakeholders? There's other parts of the book, but I think that's a really useful tool to help think about, because that's where you start. And so often people skip over that step and start jumping to solutions.
And so what do you see as if you're a student or you're somebody that's in business and you're trying to identify a problem, what are the key ways in which you can identify problems that are in need of solving? How do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to actually sort of go back to what I said earlier about doing this AI analysis of the themes of your interviews. And the one theme that popped out, because I had Claude rank order them in terms of the frequency of which these themes were mentioned. The first one was entrepreneurs, disruptors telling you, pick a very big, thorny problem that doesn't have particularly good solutions to it right now. And not only is that the basis for a potentially great startup, because if you could attack that problem, people are going to pay you to help solve it, right? So it's the same thing inside organizations. If you're looking for a problem that's actually going to help the organization create a lot of value, find one that lots of people are talking about because it's a pain point shared by lots of different people. In other words, it's causing trouble to a lot of different people. And then ask yourself, what is the current solution? How do we currently address this? If it's not a particularly helpful solution that people are really satisfied with, that's something that if you can actually make headway on that, you're going to create the organization a lot of value, and that's going to help you with your reputation, with your career advancement opportunities. So that's usually the advice that I give to students as they think about entering the workforce, because that's what's going to help you get visibility inside the organization and stand out. The challenge is complicated problems are often very difficult to solve. There's a huge amount of uncertainty. There's a lot of downside risk, not unlike the things that you've learned in your podcast series.
So, you talk a lot about this notion of sort of structured thinking, right? But then there's this other side of the coin which says it's all about intuition, right? How do we sort of lead with intuition, trust your gut? How do you sort of juxtapose those two concepts in your own thinking?
So some of you may be familiar with this concept of System 1 and System 2 thinking. The late, great Danny Kahneman, great psychologist who happened to win the Nobel Prize in economics because of his behavioral work, he made this distinction. So System 1 is intuition. System 1 thinking is we do it pre-consciously. We don't even know we're doing it. It happens automatically, right? Our brains are great at getting pieces of information, detecting a pattern in them, and very quickly coming to a solution. But there's a downside of System 1 thinking. System 1 thinking is often wrong. It is, right? So intuition's not always wrong, but it happens so fast, and you tend to pay attention to things that maybe they're important, maybe they're not important, right? And you tend to gloss over that and come up to a very quick solution. System 2 thinking, on the other hand, is slow, it's deliberate, it requires effort. This is where structured thinking comes in. And this is essentially what we do in education. We give people tools and frameworks to slow their thinking down, to structure it, so then they can hopefully get the right information, They can use the right frameworks. They can make sure that they are evaluating a broad swath of potential solutions. They evaluate it appropriately rather than their brain within milliseconds coming up with an answer to the question. So I am not a huge fan of using intuition to solve complicated problems, right? I'm much more of a fan of structured thinking because intuition can lead you astray.
You'll love the fact that it was actually a professional golfer who recommended, when he was asked what books he has to recommend, it was Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow,
yeah.
that he actually recommended, which is not what you'd expect to hear from a professional golfer. But,
no, not at all, but great to hear that he recommended it.
Yeah. So when we think about AI and the role of AI, specifically in how it's having an impact on companies' ability to scale, any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think we're living in an era now of billion-dollar companies with 1 or 2 employees. So New York Times just had an article, I think it was not this previous weekend, but the weekend before. There's a healthcare company, essentially pharmaceutical retailer, distributor, that has 2 employees, and they're going to probably do $1.5 billion in sales this year. So we're living in a time of probably the most profound technological change that maybe humanity has ever seen. But it's a technology that allows entrepreneurs to scale things quickly and really at a really low capital intensity. So again, I do think that this technology, because agentic AI allows us to automate workflows, which means we don't need as many people to do that, right? It allows us to come up with creative ideas, which means we don't need as many people to do that. So in some sectors, I think you're going to increasingly see companies that scale rather quickly and to great revenue generation in a way that we have never seen before, largely enabled by AI. Now, that's sort of maybe one of the positive sides of AI. As an educator, I can tell you that I'm concerned about AI because as an educator, the risk of AI from a learning standpoint is that people have this powerful temptation to offload their thinking to a machine. Why do I have to think anymore? Can't the machine do it for me? And that is the risk. So the challenge that we're facing in higher education is how do we make sure that we are developing students, people, citizens that are AI literate, can understand how to use this technology responsibly, ethically, and well, but without sacrificing what makes us human, our judgment, our critical thinking, our morality. Because AI is morality free, right? It's been trained on an enormous amount of data and it's largely agnostic to any sort of value system. So that's the needle that we're trying to thread. It can be a fantastic tool to scale a startup. It can be a fantastic tool for organizations, but there are some downside risks. And in education, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're threading that needle.
So as a last question, as the dean of a major business school in this country with countless students looking and trying to find their way, what advice would you have for students as they look to navigate this world in an AI-enabled framework?
This is the question that probably is on my mind more than anything. What we're starting to see in organizations is that some of it's hype, but I think some of it's real, that entry-level jobs are starting to decline. And a lot of that is because companies are saying we can have AI do many of the tasks that those entry-level jobs had. So the question becomes, how do we make sure that students, when they graduate, and are not going to have the opportunity to spend 18 to 24 months like we did, because that's when you learn how to work. It's that first 18 to 24 months of your first full-time job. That's where you learn how to navigate an organization. Well, if those opportunities are going away, then we need to focus on that in education. It moves upstream to the education providers, which means experiential learning becomes dramatically more important than it ever has been before, right? The ability to take those concepts and those tools like AI and be able to apply them to real organizational challenges while you're still a student become fundamentally critical to your ability to get that first job, but also be successful. Now, we are fortunate here at Smeal to have some phenomenal experiential learning programs. I see Robin sitting in the front row, Wall Street Boot Camp, Nittany Lion Fund. We have many, many others. But what I tell students is while you're here, there's a window of opportunity that you have that you may never have again in your life. 4 years. Yes, that 4 years is to be in a classroom and to learn frameworks and tools, discounted cash flow analysis, for example, what a balance sheet is versus a cash flow statement versus an income statement. But you also have an opportunity to apply that knowledge to real world problems and challenges, and that's what's going to help you be successful. And it's more important now in the age of AI than it ever has been before.
Dean Corey Phelps, you heard him live here first, but I'm sure you're available in the building for all those looking to follow up as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ryan.
I'll call Asia Grant. I'd now like to welcome Asia Grant here. Feel free to adjust the mic as ever your needs may require.
Oh, yes. That was very riveting. And there's a bunch of people in the audience that already know me, so I hope this doesn't, and we had the opportunity to meet also. So Dean Phelps, I feel like you're the only person this might be kind of a left field from, but I was very inspired by what you all said, especially with the fact of living outside of one's comfort zone. I don't think I've been comfortable since I was like 12. And as I look out to the audience, I also feel very grateful that you all took time out of your very busy days, college students, professors, people that are traveling in as well. I know the value of time, especially in entrepreneurship. Time and money are very equal, and especially with students, time and grades are pretty much very equal. But I would love to see a fuller room. So I kind of want to do something which you can say no to. But
I've never been known to say no to a podcast guest, Asia.
I kind of want to dare to disrupt the auditorium. I want to go out and kind of yell and be like, hey guys, I'm a content creator. I've made over like $600,000 making content. I'm sure someone here probably wants to know how to do that. So come to the auditorium, because I would love, wouldn't people love to see if it was more filled in here?
Let's see it.
Okay, great.
Do we follow you? Because I don't know that I can
you wanna come?
offer that same level of support.
No, it's fine. I mean, you'll give me authority because people know you're like the Goldman Sachs guy. People don't know who I am. So you should come with me. And if anyone here is on the social team, you should come with us. But I'm just going to yell for like 10 seconds and be right back. Is that okay? Is that okay? We'll see if anyone comes in. If one person comes in, I'll be very happy. I think that's the best introduction I can give myself.
Well, I'm going to do another formal introduction because this is being recorded and we've got a live audience here, but we'll have many, many listeners, of course, that actually dial into the podcast. So this is Dare to Disrupt, a podcast about Penn State alumni who are innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders, and the stories behind their success. I'm your host, Ryan Newman. On the show today is Asia Grant. Asia is a creative entrepreneur, content creator, and the founder of Scent Social Club. The Scent Social Club hosts the Nolita Perfume Tour, an immersive experience that matches participants with their signature fragrance. An award-winning perfumer, Asia has spent hundreds of hours researching, developing, and purchasing fragrances. She's also the founder of Redoux, a New York City-based fragrance and skincare company. Asia earned her bachelor's degree in marketing from the Smeal College of Business and graduated with honors from the Schreyer Honors College. Asia, I'd like to welcome you to Dare to Disrupt. This is a first for us. You are the first entrepreneur we've had with a background in beauty and fragrance. And we are excited to have you here in person for our 50th podcast of Dare to Disrupt. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ryan.
So Asia, I'd like to start as we normally do, which is at the beginning. So would you share with our guests really where you spent your early formative years well before you became the person and entrepreneur that you are here today?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Westchester, Pennsylvania. I was there from like elementary. Yes, come closer. ASMR. But I grew up in Westchester, Pennsylvania. I went through the Chester County school system. I was the 4th graduating class from Bayard Rustin High School. If there's anyone from Westchester out there. Oh, no. Anyway. And that's pretty much where I spent my formative years. I was one of the art kids. I didn't really know that I wanted to go into business. I really had no idea what I wanted to do in high school. I just knew that I wanted to be my own boss. Didn't really know what that meant, but I was interested in art and public speaking. And I think it's because I was hard-headed. I'm sure Robin remembers me. I was very big ego, big ego. I had a big ego. And I remember hearing in one of my, I think it was English class, and our teacher said, more people are afraid of public speaking than of death. And I was like, I'm not going to be afraid of anything, and I'm not afraid of dying, so I'm going to learn how to public speak so I can be stronger than everyone else. And I remember that exact thought. And my high school had a speaking competition, and I tried out, and essentially you try out and then you get selected and then you have to compete in front of the entire school. So at 16, I had to compete in front of my school of 1,000 students.
Wow.
And memorize a script and essentially like perform it for everyone. They put it on TV. And that was one of my first memories of being like, yeah, I kind of love this.
So you crushed it.
I did crush it. I was the crowd favorite, but I lost because I went over time because I got too comfortable on stage.
No comment on that.
No comment.
So this idea of having this desire to overcome, and this idea of in the face of fear, you will stand taller. Where does that come from? Where did it come from back then?
Where did that come from? I think it's a really demented combination of like looking at fear of failure and like a desire for prestige. It's like, I don't want to fail. I want this prestigious thing. So I'm going to just push because I feel like if I don't push, then I won't achieve anything. I attribute a lot to like my 16-year-old self. I feel like my 16-year-old self is much wiser than who I am now, because some of the things that she like wrote in her journal, I was like, oh my God, you had all the answers. You just didn't have a lot of the resources.
Or a driver's license.
Or a driver's license. And something that I used to think, which I still think to this day, is I had a terrible fear of never becoming the person I was meant to be. I didn't know who that was, but I was just terrified that I would never achieve that. So that fear kind of propelled me into doing things that made me feel uncomfortable, because I was like, oh my God, like what if I never become her? And then I'm like dying and I regret everything. So let me just like do the things that seem like they're a good idea or that I'm interested in, so I don't have regrets.
I think there's that quote about, hell is the life that you never lived or the choices you never took. Amazing. So you're feeling pretty sure of yourself. You
can call it that.
You're 16, 17, and you have to decide where you want to go to college. How did you make that decision?
Yes. Again, I was very fueled by prestige. I thought that the answer to all of life's problems was to be, successful in a very conventional way. So to me, that meant Ivy League schools. I was like, I'm going to Harvard. I'm going to Yale. Like, that's simply all that is going to happen for me. And my lovely, lovely guidance counselor, who I'm still in touch with, he's an angel. He was like, it's also a good strategy to have backup plans. I said, I simply don't need a backup plan. And he's like, Asia, you're not the valedictorian. I was like, listen, I was like, 60th in the class. So I'm like, I was fine. I was in AP classes, but I wasn't like the valedictorian, the salutatorian, but like in there, I was able to go to Harvard. And he was like, you know what, you should get a backup. So I was like, okay. Penn State had come to my school, and they really preached the message of the community and the strength of the alumni base. And at that point, I kind of knew, I don't know how, it might have been something my parents taught me, but it was less about like what you know and more about who you know. And like most of your opportunities come from the people that believe in you. So I thought, well, Penn State kind of has this built-in network effect of people that just believe in each other because of the affiliation. So yeah, let's do that. And I applied, and it was my safety school. Love it. Love, best decision ever. Didn't get into any of my Ivies at all. So got rejected from all of them. Still have all of my rejection letters as as my own humbling experience. And I decided on Penn State because of the strength of the alumni base and the investment of people.
Well, as one of our other former podcast guests, Mo Bende, who's a Unicorn founder, as his father said to him when he got 12 rejection letters, it only takes one. Right? So Penn State was your one.
Penn State was definitely my one, time and time again. I remember thinking, okay, we'll make it happen, because there was a lot of people that were like football, and I'm not a big football person. It was like sports and all of these things and party. And I was like, I don't do any of that. Like, am I going to fit in? Is it even going to be someplace that I can thrive? And that made me very down. I was very sad, to be frank and honest. But I do believe that the universe kind of like opens up opportunities for you, and it will feed into you if it is meant for you. And I have to say this because Smeal was the reason I really came. But 2 weeks before truly committing, like paying the bill, I was also in like a financial place where my parents were like, we can't support you, unfortunately. And I had never had a job. So I was like writing every single day to like local, interest groups, being like, I need scholarship money, and really like pitching myself as like a good investment. And I scraped together a little bit of scholarship money where I could get through my first semester of Penn State. But after that, I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. And 2 weeks before the bill was due, we got a letter from Smeal, and I was awarded a Bunton-Waller fellowship. So I got a full ride coming here.
Amazing. Talk about
so
taking.
Thank you, Smeal.
Talk about taking a chance on the right person.
Yes.
So you roll into Smeal, you come to Penn State, and are there still feelings of like this isn't your place? And how did you ultimately get acclimated and sort of settle in your first early years?
Yes, and I think it was just the regular. Maybe not the regular. It was at least something that my friends, my families, my guidance counselor said, this is normal. So I've told myself this is normal. But just the adjustment of coming to college and then being a self-reliant individual while also being very ambitious, it was hard for me for like the first semester. And paired with my desire to be like prestigious and like achieving and ambitious, I think I got my first B. Like when you're like, get out of my way. I'm like, don't give me an A-. I was like, me and calculus were fighting that first semester. So I definitely struggled, but I ended up finding my way through the Presidential Leadership Academy. That was like my first taste into Schreyer, because I didn't come in through Schreyer. So I think it was Dr. Kuplin. I'm pretty sure you gave me one of my references for the Presidential Leadership Academy, for sure. And then my academic advisor, Terry Cummins, who's not here anymore, but they came together, and Jamie Campbell was like, you need to be in this group in Schreyer, though you were not in it. And that's really where I found like my people, and also the Honors College overall, and really started to thrive from there.
So for those who don't know, the Presidential Leadership Academy, also known as PLA, is this group of cohort of students, some Schreyer, some not Schreyer. And it was a gift, I believe, by Ed and Helen Hintz that funded it. And it really, how would you articulate, because I was never in it, so how would you articulate, Asia, how it actually enacts and what it does for students and how it basically goes about experiencing the university?
Yes. The PLA, I think, was one of the most crucial experiences in colleges of tailoring the way that I think. The whole philosophy around it is being able to think in the gray. So understanding that life and also business is not a binary thing. There are multiple perspectives from multiple people. It really builds your ability to just think critically. And especially, I know that lawyers have to do this, but when you're essentially making a case, of course you have your own stance, but in order to essentially bolster your stance or just be a better negotiator, business person, lawyer, anything, I think just critical thinker, you need to understand the perspectives of others and be able to make their arguments as well as you can make your own. And that's what PLA was all about. And we had that class we had Dean Brady at the time, who was the dean of the Honors College while I was there, and then President Barron as well. And we took classes with them when we talked about university policy, as well as like at the time, there was like a lot of Title IX things that were happening. So having the opportunity to speak with faculty and other students on how to not address those problems, because we weren't the ones that were like fixing it, but at least being able to discuss them from every perspective, so it didn't create like a myopic ideology around how things should be. Because personally, I think if you think about how things should be, then you'll always kind of be in a state of disappointment.
Well, you're in this PLA class, you're having these experiences. You mentioned the word lawyer. What did you think you wanted to be when you got out of school?
What a hard question.
She's pausing and her eyes are closed.
Yes. What did I want to be? We had this discussion a couple of weeks ago, and this term will continue to come up, but I wanted not really any one specific thing, but I wanted prestige and I wanted recognition. And especially as like a freshman, sophomore, that is presented to you either through the supply chain major, because it's like this, you're gonna get a job and we're the best in the country and these are all the things and here are the companies that we like recruit with and it's amazing, and job placement. I was like, yes, amazing, fancy brand names. And finance. So it's like Goldman Sachs, bulge bracket banks, and investment banking and private wealth management. So it's all of this kind of internal dialogue, for myself at least, of like, this is what prestige is. Like, you need to work at Goldman Sachs, you need to work at Morgan Stanley, you need to work at all these things, you need to major in this. And that's what I thought that I wanted. And I was originally a supply chain major, and then I was a finance major. And while doing that, there was just something nagging deep in my brain where I'm like, I can do these things. Like, I'm getting the grades to do them, but I don't experience, there's two words that I normally use now to describe this, but I don't experience the joy, kind of like the visceral joy of like, oh my God, look at this wondrous thing that I'm able to do, which is also paired with my favorite state of being, which is mania, which is like, I'm so like energized by this loop of work that I could work for, 100 years and never sleep. And that feeling is an addictive state for me, at least. And since I've known what that felt like, I had this like constant nag when I was in those two majors where I was like, this isn't it.
So I'm sure many students can relate to what you've just said. Maybe not as eloquently as you've just said it.
It took a while to get there.
But as you're having this internal struggle, you're accelerating closer and closer to that point of graduation where you have to make a decision. So what choice did Asia Grant make upon graduating from Penn State?
Yes. What choice did Asia make? So the final choice that I think was a very pivotal move, there were two pivotal points in my college career where I was like, okay, I need to bet on me. And I think that's like core to entrepreneurship. It's like, I need to bet on me, and I need to bet on my joy, not the prestige, not other people's opinions, not what my parents want, not what the job is going to pay me, not what any of these things, because people will always bet against you. This is me also talking to myself. But if you bet on yourself consistently, even if it's scary, I fully believe that like you are your best investment. So the first way I bet on myself here is I switched majors to the thing that was most fun for me, to work with the person that was most fun to me, which is Dr. Coupland, who's here. And she knows I tell her this all the time. So I switched to being a marketing major. And through that, I gatewayed into the Honors College. And I wrote the thesis of my dreams. I had so much fun. I wrote about Korean cosmetics. Korean cosmetics and packaging design, and why we make the emotional investment in the things that we buy based on what it looks like. Obsessed. Had so much fun. She'll tell you, I was manic at that state. I came in all the time. I was like, I can't wait to talk about my thesis. And I flew to Korea by myself, courtesy of Smeal and the Honors College for, supporting all of the expenses to be able to go, and cranked out my thesis. And it was amazing. And that was like a true bet on myself and choosing what kind of lined up for me after school. Still was competing with like the prestige kind of like, ooh, I need to do what other people think is successful. Didn't know what that really meant. But for me, I was like, I have, again, the intuition. I know we're supposed to not be thinking, we're supposed to be thinking slow. I was definitely thinking fast. My intuition said, okay, no matter what you want to do, you probably need to be in New York. So let's just get a job in New York. And of course, everyone says, when you don't know what you want to do, you should be a consultant. So I got a consulting job with IBM in New York. And that is what I did. And that is where I quickly learned, like you said, in the first 18 to 24 months, that's where you're like learning how to be a worker in the workforce. And I said, I am not a worker in the workforce. This is not for me.
And what, if you had to kind of articulate, what was it about the work and being quote unquote a worker in the workforce that just wasn't jibing with your, internal voice?
Yes. For me, and I want to say that I think it's different for everyone. And maybe this is just something that happened to me in my path and what, didn't resonate with how I wanted to be a professional. But I just didn't understand the office politics. I was like too slow. I was too dumb for understanding like how like, oh, you need to talk to this person in this way and you need to be in the office until this time to show that you're working, blah, blah, blah. I said, the work that I need to do needs to be done in 2 hours and it will be done in 2 hours. And I got it done in 2 hours. So I'm going to go home. And that did not fly. Which now that I hire people, I kind of get. I was like, yeah, Asia, not very cute, not very good. But that, and then that just kind of set me up. I set myself up for failure in that type of way. But I also knew deep down that it wasn't really something that I wanted. Like that prestige desire of being like, okay, I'm gonna, climb up the ladder. I didn't want to climb up any ladder. I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to like be fighting for promotions and all of these things. I don't want someone to tell me where I have to be at what time. And we kind of talked about this before when we met, but I wanted to be in New York because New York feels like a very generative city. I feel like it's, of course, the tagline of New York. It's like, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. So I was like, there's so much opportunity here. I'll just figure it out. But I need to create a nest egg. So I also picked consulting because I was like, this is like the most amount of money that I can make with like the least amount of hours. Because if I was like in investment banking, I could have made more money, but I would have had to be chained to my desk. And I was like, absolutely not. I have to go home. And I like sleeping. And I heard that people don't sleep in investment banking. So I was like, ooh, no. So I saved 50% of every paycheck.
Wow. Say that again.
50% of every paycheck.
In New York?
I lived below the poverty line in New York.
How do you live below the poverty line in New York?
I lived far away.
Okay.
I lived like deep in Queens, which isn't even deep in Queens anymore. But I lived with an engaged couple at the time. So it was 3 of us splitting rent. And I just saved money. Like I budgeted everything. I had a $200 fun budget every month where I was like, fun is going out to dinner with friends to buying gum at like the convenience store. And I only have $200 to buying clothes, like everything. And that is because I wanted to be out of corporate life within 3 years of graduation. Because I knew that if I was there past 3 years, I would get the golden handcuffs and be like, oh, I'll delay and blah, 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 and all these other things. And I can always make it happen later. And I was like, no, we need to be out, which means we need to have an idea before that. And we need to have enough cash to be able to just coast and continue to live under the poverty line. So living under the poverty line was also just like training for like entrepreneurship and just pretending that I had no money.
Wow, really impressive. And you said something really prescient there, which is this idea that if you had this fear that if you stayed too long, you'd never take the chance to leave.
Correct.
And that's that. So would you say you were motivated by the inspiration to do something different and creative and unique, or the fear that if you didn't step out and do something, you might get trapped into this world that you really didn't want to subscribe to?
Both. I had this, I didn't know, I felt like I had a lot of agency over my life, but I always had this looming, like, it could still go wrong. It could still go wrong and you could still mess up. So make sure that you're really proactively not messing up. Do not trip yourself up. Do not get in your own way. And that feeling I've had probably from 16 to, how old am I now? 31. That went away maybe last year.
Wow.
Maybe. It still like lingers. But I was talking to my co-founder about this. I was like, wow, this is the richest I've ever felt in my life. It's not like I have a whole bunch of money, but like I don't have this like fear of like, it's not going to happen, because I made everything that I wanted to have happen in the course of like, oh my gosh, 6 or 7 years post-graduation, which felt like, I'm sure all the entrepreneurs in the room know what this feels like. It felt like 700 lifetimes. I was like, oh my God, I've died 1,000 times trying to do these companies.
Amazing. Okay, so you have this amazing plan. You're living well below the poverty line. You're socking money away. And so it's now time to take that leap. How did you initially take that leap? What was the initial idea? What was the problem you were trying to solve or the opportunity you were trying to present? And take us through that first experience.
Sure. So the idea, I always wanted to work in beauty. When I was here, I applied to Estee Lauder, I applied to L'Oreal, but since I wasn't supply chain, they were like, no, your job would need to be like figuring out how to get the caps in the bottles and the boxes in the right places at the right time. And I was like, that's not what I want to do. I want to work on brand. And they were like, no. So that is what I wanted to do. And when I moved to New York, I started applying to those jobs and they were still like, no. So I was like, anyway, I'll just do it myself. I will just start my own beauty brand, which was a big thing in 2018 to 2019. And I had started small little brands, you know, like selling things on Etsy while I was at school. And I also had like my own soap brand kind of like in high school, but there was a lot of stuff that I was very bad at. And the thing is mainly like the website and like operation stuff, which I can figure out, but I thought it would be more fun to be able to do it with someone who I considered smarter than myself. One of the best advice I've ever been given is like, make sure that you're the dumbest person in the room or the dumbest among your friends, because then you'll always like be lifted up. So I reached out to my fellow PLA graduate. He graduated the year after me, but Alejandro Cuevas, he was an IST, to be my business partner in 2018. And I timed it because he had just graduated and he was taking a gap year between his PhD and school. And I was a year out of school already. And I was like, hey, now that you have free time, and I'm nervous for our friendship because I want us to keep talking all of the time. Do you want to start a company together? And he was like, yeah, great. I said, okay, great. It's going to be a beauty brand because I know all about that and we can make it happen. He's like, sure, whatever. Like, that's fine. Like, I'll do the website and stuff. So we went through so many different iterations. We were like, we're going to do CBD and we're going to do like, what else did we want to do? We wanted to do like high clinical skincare. But the power of constraints prevented us from doing that. Penn State was really lovely. They introduced us to like people that work in contract manufacturing. Like the Penn State network continues to deliver. But as we were talking to people, they're like, yeah, if you wanna do clinical skincare, your minimum order quantity is gonna be 10,000 units. I said, what is selling 10,000 units? I was like, I have to buy the inventory before I sell the thing. I was like, we don't have the budget. I was like, we're not doing that. So we ended up sitting on fragrance because as we were doing like market research and trying things out and just seeing how people interact with products, people would always be like, ooh, this smells so good, like very intuitively before even like mentioning anything about the efficacy of the product or like the packaging. If they smelled it, they'd be like, ooh, this smells good. And I was like, ooh, I love a visceral reaction. I can storytell around a visceral reaction. Let's do all of our marketing and narrative and brand positioning around fragrance. And I will dive into this. And it was like a fun brand thing for me. So all of our fragrances, the brand was called Redoux. It's meant to be soft again. Do in French means soft, and redo, soft again. Fun. There's another, you guys can ask me afterwards what the non-PR story is, because that's what I put together for PR. That is not actually how the name came together. But
that's the insider advantage of coming live.
Yes, that's the insider advantage of coming
recording.
live. Yes. But our stories, and this is still my philosophy around fragrance today, is that yes, fragrance is the most powerful way to connect to memories and emotions. It's used in like Alzheimer and like and dementia research. Like you can see, like if you smell something that's familiar to you, it will literally transport you to another place. And I think that's beautiful, but I also think it's a really wonderful way to connect with other people of our shared feelings and emotions. Like, you know what it feels like to have the fear of not achieving what you want to be, or the pride of achieving the thing that you've been working for a lifetime. I know what it feels like too. We might not have the same experience, but we are bonded in that way. So I wanted to use fragrance as a way to kind of tell those shared memories and experiences of just all people to help us remember that we are all connected. And that was Redoux. That was essentially Redoux. And that launched in July 2019 to 0 people. Now that I look back, I was like, I see everything wrong with our launch strategy. I see everything that we did incorrectly. But that was our first leap of faith, $7,500 down the drain. And that is when we were like, it's time to cook. It's time to make some money.
So how did you go about actually making money? How did you get the cash register to ring?
Yes. Listen, I'm going to say this worked for me And before I even talk about the things that I did, I think it is important for anyone that wants to start a business to understand what their personal superpowers are. Everyone has something that they are much better at than anyone else. I have the gift of the gab. She loves to yap. She has no fear talking to people. And I love to also collect people. There's so many people that I love to have like in my pocket. And I'm like, oh, you know so-and-so, I can connect you with so-and-so. So clearly, of course, Penn State was made for me with all the alumni networking. So I used those superpowers that I had. And I was in the city of New York. So I was like, everyone that essentially are the gatekeepers of what is tasteful and what is good and what should be seen by everyone else in the world lives in this city. I need to find those people. So I was very much a foot soldier in New York, using Instagram, being like, who is connected with who are the beauty editors, where, how can I get in their orbit, not as a brand founder, but as a peer, because as you get into those kind of worlds, it's very friends help friends. So that is where I started to just find myself. I was like, okay, I know that the girlfriend of the social media girl that works at Glossier works at Vice, and Vice is doing a collaboration at this cool museum. So if I show up at this museum and talk to this person, then I'll be introduced to this person and invited to this party and go. And it was very, very manual. But that strategy ended up getting me to a point where I met one of the top beauty editors at Vogue, and I knew of her. I was like, oh, yes, I'm not going to be crazy and be like, yes, I know that you're the beauty editor of Vogue. I follow you on Instagram and blah, blah, blah. I was just like, oh, yes, okay, I know who this is. We're sitting like this amongst other people. We introduce ourselves. The very kosher thing to do in those circles is like, oh, yeah, we'll follow each other on Instagram. So we just did that. I mentioned nothing about my brand. And this must have been probably like January 2020.
Whoa.
So pre-pandemic, right before the pandemic, before we even knew what pandemic meant, I'm at like a warehouse party with this woman. And then the pandemic happens, and then George Floyd is murdered. And then there's this whole push to do, supporting Black-owned businesses. And this was a Black woman at Vogue. And she wrote an article called Black-owned businesses, Black-owned beauty and fashion brands that you should support now and forever. So this must be like May 2020. We started the brand in July 2019. I see her post this. We follow each other on Instagram. And in her caption, because it wasn't on the Vogue site yet, it was just on her personal Instagram, she was like, if anyone knows of any other brands that I should include in this list, just let me know. And I took that post and I sent it to everyone that I follow on Instagram. I said, all of you need to comment Redoux right now. We're doing a mass spam. Do it. Blew up her entire, immediately. Redoux started blowing up because we get all of these tags. And she put us as the first placement.
Wow.
And that was our first earned media.
Amazing.
Thank you. And then because everyone was scrambling to get this type of content out, that got syndicated across Vanity Fair, CNN News, where else were we? We were in the Wall Street Journal. I learned how press worked very quickly. They were like, oop, we need to syndicate this. We're just going to pay for this, and we're going to pull all of these things. So we got, I think after that, we had 100 earned press placements.
Wow.
And we got called by Nordstrom and the Real, and we were doing, we were featured in Facebook and Instagram's holiday campaign, Google's holiday campaign. It was a massive undertaking, to the point where now I look in hindsight, I was like, oh wow, that never happens again. That was kind of like a black swan event, honestly.
And so it's great you're getting all these ad placements that then caused you to get a tremendous influx of orders that you then must fulfill.
Yes, let's remember, I still have my corporate job at this point also.
Whoa.
So I'm still working. I moved to a smaller financial services consulting firm, so still consulting in 2020. And we're all at home because it's lockdown, and I'm an only child, and my parents were like, please come back home, please.
Every parent's greatest wish.
I know, they're like, come home. So I was like, okay, sounds good, I'll come home. Came home with all of my stuff. I was making soaps and candles. That's what we were selling. Came home, and after that happened, blowing up. Phone like just constantly shaking from orders. And I would take these meetings with, our clients, my boss. And again, I know I was a bad employee, so please, Asia, what's the progress update? Oh, no, nothing, zero, no update, nothing, haven't heard from the client, great. Slam the computer down, run downstairs, making like 300 pounds of soap in my parents' basement, like pouring things, packing things with my mom. My mom is also lying to her like company. She's like, okay, we have to pack all these boxes, going to the post office every single day with like over 100 boxes of like things to ship out. And I was like, this is kind of great. Like, I'm not really working. My paycheck comes every 2 weeks still, and the business is thriving. Should I even like quit my job? And that fear was still there. I was still kind of like, I was essentially split between like my commitment to my job and the commitment to the business, and almost convincing myself that, oh, well, it's fine. Like it's fine to live like this. Like it's not bad. But again, I had the deep nag, my deep intuition. I'll keep making fun of myself, Dean Phelps, and just be like, my intuition was like, you cannot do this. But I still had fear. I was like, it could fail. It could fail. It's doing well now, but it could fail. So I love asking the universe very specific things. And if this is woo-woo to people, to each their own. But I love asking the universe. I was like, can I just have a sign? I need a very specific sign. I need a very specific, I want something that feels so magically successful that's like, yes, Asia, you've made it. Like, you can quit your job. And then the day after, the New York Times emailed us, and they're like, we're going to put you in our gift guide.
Wow.
And I was like, oh.
Oh, come on, that's enough.
I was like, maybe just one more. I was a little greedy. I was like, maybe just one more sign. I just need one more sign. And at this point, does everyone here know who Glossier is? The company Glossier, the original unicorn beauty brand, which was like an aspiration of mine to work there. They had released a grant application for Black-owned businesses, and it would essentially be like Glossier would be your mentor, and they would give you just like no strings attached money. And we had applied, and like I said, I had a lot of industry plant friends, so I like asked my friend after round one when we applied if we like what our score was, and we got like a 4 out of 5 as our like ranking. And my co-founder was like, oh, we didn't get it. Like, we got an 80%, like, ain't no way we're in the next round. And I was like, I have faith. He's like, we didn't make it. So that dream was dead at that point. But again, I asked the universe, I was like, please just give me one more sign. Day after Glossier calls, they're like, yeah, you made it.
Wow.
They're like, out of, I think it was 10,000, we were top 16. So they're like, yeah, you won the Glossier grant.
Amazing.
And I was like, cool. Emailed my job. I said, this is my 2 weeks. And I quit my job October 2020. And I have not been employed. I've not been a W-9 employee since.
So like all businesses, we talk about the need to pivot. The environment changes. You have ebbs and flows in the business. How did you think about that experience in hindsight, looking back now? And in what ways have you had to pivot in that business?
What a wonderful question. Thank you. A lot. There was a lot of pivoting within Redoux, and then there was grander pivoting. As some of you all heard, I also run this fragrance tour now. So I will be a little bit, since we're in the context of business, and I know we have smart business minds in here, I'm going to do a little bit of business explanation. But I'm sure, as some of you all know, when you're selling products, you're essentially, an e-commerce, or you're like a brick and mortar. And there's a very specific business model of how to make that work. And there's a very specific skill set necessary to like push that business forward. The business model looks very much like a staircase. And that is because of the cash flow that is necessary to be able to push products out. You go up, which is what we experience with like press. We get a lot of demand, and then you kind of like plateau out. And in that plateau time, you need to be using the cash reserves to be able to build out your contract manufacturing relationships, hiring the right people, getting all of like your agency teams to be able to then push yourself back up again. It's a lot of supply chain skills, and it's also just you have to be really good at like cash and resource management allocation. I had none of those skills. Not a one. I had no idea. So after about like 2 years of like our meteoric success, we were kind of like, ooh, what is this tick down? What is this tick down? We have no idea what to do with this. We thought that demand just goes up. We thought the graph only goes up. We didn't know the graph also goes down. So we were learning that and trying to understand what that meant for us as a business. And I came to the realization after I was like studying different business models and like what things worked and how they worked. I was like, oh my God, to make this business model work, like I need to be good at supply chain, and I need to be good at like resource management and hiring. And I was like, oh my God, this is like college all over again. I did not want to do supply chain, and I picked the business model where I need to be good at supply chain. Oh no. So that was like this must have been like end of 2023, early 2024, where I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm all the way back at like square one because everyone's like seeing all of the success, and it's like, look at all the press and look at all of the things. And I was like, baby, our cash flow is so busted. I was like, it's not doing great. I am not built for this. I was good at the marketing and the branding side. And I feel very fortunate because I had a co-founder that was able to kind of recognize the fact that the way that we were growing the business was really around content and my ability to connect with people. And all of my mentors, even like my Penn State mentors that are like, we're not on the internet, but you need to be on the internet. Like you need to be on TikTok. People want to hear you talk. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I want the brand to speak for itself. And they're like, no. You need to get on the internet. So that's how a lot of our sales were coming. And it just like wasn't enough. Selling a $20 bar of soap, you have to sell like 5,000 of those. And if I had TikTok Shop back then, I could have figured it out, but we didn't have it at that point. So I was burnt out. I was tired. And the only thing that was really making me kind of like joyful, which my co-founder recognized, was me taking people in New York, because I'm still trying to work this strategy of connecting with people, and like the right people will be able to say the right things and put us out into the map. And I would start this series that was like, I'm a professional perfumer in New York, and I love helping people find their signature scent. Here's Elias. He's like a watch dealer from Brooklyn, and he only wears gold, but he loves smelling like an old Catholic woman with a wad of hundreds in her bag. And like that was a series, and people would comment like, oh my God, I want to do that. And my co-founder was like, I think you should do that. Like, I think that should be the thing. I think people would pay you to go, smell fragrances with you. And I was like, you're a dumb man. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, no one's going to pay me to do this. Then the cash kept running out. And I was like, I guess we have to, try this idea to see if people will actually pay me to do this. And I posted the most boring TikTok. And this is something, if you look in your transcription post, my interview of the theme, you got to just do things. I really believe in like, you just gotta, when you're not ready, you just gotta kind of grit through it and do it. And I had this whole grand vision, being a marketing major, of like things need to be branded, things need to be beautiful, it needs to be packaged in a certain way. And it doesn't. I posted to TikTok, literally like this, not even a cute angle, not even good lighting. And I was like, hey, I'm Asia, I'm a perfumer. Would anyone want to come on this perfume tour with me? Like, I'll make it really nice. I'll make recommendations. It'll just be a good time. You get to meet good people. We'll have fun. I'll take you through New York. No stress. Just comment and let me know. 15-second video. 200 people signed up from that. I sent out a type form to everyone. In that type form, I was like, it's going to be $100. People paid for that. I hadn't talked to any of the stores. I didn't even have a route. I didn't really know what the offer was. I just had like a list of emails and then like $5,000 in my bank account and 30 days to actually make whatever it was that I was now selling. And that was the pivot because I needed to make rent.
Amazing. And this is the Sense Social Club that we have
This is
today.
now Sense Social Club, where we've now hosted over 700 people on the Perfume Tour. We've been featured in the New York Times again, Vogue, Beauty Independent. We've done events for Spotify, McKinsey, Airbnb. We're partnering with, is my NDA up? It'll be up by the time this goes out. We're partnering with Airbnb for a very big event that's happening in the US. You all know what's going on. You know why people are flying in to this country. We're doing a really big event with them for that.
Amazing.
I won't say the name, but yeah, that's what Sense Social Club is. That started that random TikTok went out October 2024. First tour was November 2024. And yeah, I do it every weekend now. It's great.
Amazing. And so when you look ahead to the future, what do you envision or see, or what are you really focused on, and what are you not so focused on?
Yes, when I look into the vision, to the future, and the vision for the future, it's funny. The PLA class came to New York this past fall, and they asked me to speak, and I actually did like a perfume master class for them, and I made sure everyone went home with like some perfumes, and it was very fun.
And their signature scents?
And their signature scents, absolutely. And someone asked me a very similar question. Like, I feel like students really, they get how to talk business. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like, you guys talk business better than I do. Where they're like, what's your 5-year vision? Like, what's the growth trajectory of the company? And I'm like, wow. There's something I learned from Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, I feel like, are like the godfathers of true business. I feel like if anyone loves business, you need to listen to them because the wisdom never ends. And something that they implement in their own business, in Berkshire Hathaway, as well as the businesses that they buy, is that there doesn't need to be a grand plan. It should just feel like a blessing to be able to wake up every day and steer the ship. And I've gotten to the point now where that is my own philosophy, where I was like, every day I wake up and I look at how the business is doing. I look at my team. I structure cash management a lot better now so we can actually operate in this way and not feel like everything is drowning. But we steer the ship every day to the direction that we think is best, which for Sense Social Club and truly at the core of what Redoux stood for also is to be of service and to take care of others and to make others feel seen and heard. And all the projects that we do support that mission, all the way to our little recommendation sheets that we give to everyone, to all of the follow-up emails that we send, to the way that we shoot content. But that's really the vision, is to just steer the ship every day.
Amazing. Well, I have an outtake that I have to say, but before I get to that, I want to let a couple of audience members ask questions, and I think we have a microphone here that we could pass as well. And I'll take a couple questions, and then Asia will be around after the presentation today to also talk one-on-one as well.
No stupid questions either. And I said this one time and someone was like, oh, I'm not allowed to ask stupid questions. I'm like, no question is stupid, so please ask me anything.
Hi, Brian Barnett.
Hello, Brian.
Yes.
It's on, we can hear you.
I was curious how you ended up convincing other fragrance shops or whatever to allow you to come with a potential customer to window shop, for lack of a better word, and just come in and try. So I would expect that they could be pretty skeptical, like, who are you? And are we going to get any sales out of this? And are you going to take away business from us? And I'm just curious, the resistance you encountered or the elation that you encountered and how that all worked out.
Yes. So, wonderful question. I actually still deal with this pretty frequently. So, the women in the room, y'all have shopped for fragrance before, correct? Have the men in the room shopped for fragrance? No. They're like, my wife gets it for me. The fragrance shopping experience, and the women will probably nod, horrific, terrible. You go to Sephora, you go to any of the big stores, like a Bloomingdale's or a Saks or anything, they're selling because they're based on like commission. So oh, you don't like vanilla? I don't care. The new thing that came out is vanilla. I'm going to sell you this thing because I need to make commission. Very, very bad experience. And that's something I wanted to not have on the tour. So luckily I'm in a city where there's a lot of different types of stores. So I went to each one just to see as a customer what the retail experience would be like. Are the people warm? Are the people hospitable? Are they going to push anything onto me? And I kind of curated a list of stores that I thought kind of fit my brand ethos. And then I literally just went to, the sales team on the floor. It's not like they're, the marketing lead or anything on the corporate side. It's literally just the people that are being paid like hourly that are there. I'm like, can I talk to the manager? And I'm quite convincing. Again, the gift of gab has taken me a very, very long way. And I just told them, I was like, hey, I'm running a perfume tour. Do you mind if I bring some people in here? And they're like, whatever. I was like, okay, sounds good. And I think they were very skeptical of me at first because there are some other people that have like done this. I did some research. There's maybe like 2 or 3 other people that do it in the city from like different value standpoints. And when I say value, I mean like it's either a historical tour or they mix it with tea. So I had a very different kind of experience that I was curating. And they were skeptical until I started bringing in like 20 people every day and people were racking up like money. They're like, oh yeah, wow, we wouldn't have hit quota today if you like didn't bring in the people. So now because we had to kind of show, not tell, we really just kind of built out those relationships by being the type of partner that they would want us to be. But as I'm sure you're an entrepreneur. Yes. Managing those relationships can be funny sometimes. And we've had, some shifting, some negotiating where we've like changed different stores. And it's not for everyone, but those stores have also come back and been like, hey, we're not making as much. Can you come back? And I was like, oh,
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
One more question, and then we'll let Asia be around after.
Sure.
Yes, good evening. My name is Aquito.
I think it's on.
Okay. My name is Aquito Young from Coveroo Betting.
Hello,
And
Aquito.
I had a question of how often do you post social media content? And is that something you do independently or do you have a team?
The question, yes. So I can talk social media strategy all day with you guys for sure. But the main secret is consistency and volume, which is crazy. When I was really at my peak, when I was growing my account very aggressively, I was posting 3 times a day, both to TikTok and Instagram every day. That grew me from maybe like 2,000 to 20,000 in the course of maybe like 6 months. Now I just post at least 4 times a week across TikTok, Instagram, now YouTube Shorts, and I also post 1 YouTube long form a week. And now I have a team, but that was the first thing that I hired. I hired a video editor, and she has saved my life, and now I have 2 editors. So yes, if you want to take content seriously, 100%. Like the first hire I always say is to make a video editor. You're welcome.
Amazing. Well, Asia's going to be around after today to be able to talk about it, but we've got to do our outtake.
Oh, yes,
for
our
the
outtake.
For the formal podcast. So that was Asia Grant, founder and CEO of Scent Social Club. This episode was produced and edited by our executive producer, Katie DiFiore. Make sure to follow Dare to Disrupt on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.